Hi there, I'm Dani Henderson, spiritualtherapist.com. And today on this Sunday in August, I'm very delighted to bring to you again, for the, I don't know how many times we've played together now on this channel, but the beautiful and gifted Andrea Foulkes. Welcome, Andrea.
Welcome, Dani, too, to the wonderful Dani Henderson. Yeah, I don't think anybody bigs you up enough because you really are amazing, considering, I know your journey of what you've been through in the last 2 years. And really, it's been quite a journey. And instead of sort of like where some people who dealt with that level of grief would be crawled up in a corner and just about be coming out of their shell, you have just like put yourself out there and shared everything you've had on your own beautiful spiritual journey. And I have only, from watching some of the interviews, learned more about you as well. So it's been a beautiful journey and exploration of many ups and downs of our lives, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so one of our topics today that both of us have a lot of experience in, unfortunately or fortunately, is grief, which is what we're going to discuss. We're also going to talk about entities. We're going to talk about past lives as well. And we're going to talk about other metaphysical tools and gifts to help you out there on your individual, singular, beautiful journeys. So we'll start with grief. And thank you for your beautiful words. I was not expecting that. That's not why I do this, obviously, the work that I do on my channel. I, too, as a qualified therapist and a spiritual, the word mentor seems so like, I'm a mentor, follow me. No, nobody's allowed to follow me. I don't accept followers. That's just silly to me and embarrassing. That's that kind of, oh, no. I'm happy to share everything I know, have read, have experienced, which is most of what I deliver. Always, whether I'm in private session one-to-ones or I'm doing a broadcast like this, it is from 99.9% experience, and then maybe what someone else has shared that I felt the resonance of truth in them, and things that we've read, studied, and qualified in. So my beautiful fiance, Jeff Smith, it is tomorrow the final day of his last breath on this planet, and amazingly, he left us physically on the Lionsgate portal, because he was such an incredible, powerful spiritual man, one of the most gifted spiritual humans I've ever met in my entire life. And so I take so much from his passing that he loved me, he picked me, he chose me, and he left this life. He collapsed from a heart attack and I held him, and he left us, and then he was later revived, and then was a week with his heart being beaten by being intubated, and it was a straightforward heart attack, nothing else. I think he honestly passed from a broken heart for the sadness he felt for humanity in many levels, because he was that giant of a man. And speaking of grief, my darling, you lost your mother very recently too.
Yeah, it's funny because it's a similar date for you, and I think it is very different, the experience of losing a beloved partner, and also the circumstances. Your circumstances are very different than how I lost my mum. My mum had dementia for 8 years and was really cute with her dementia. She was 91, but she passed away on the 25th of August, and it wasn't a pleasant passing as such, and it was shocking for me because I'm an only child, and I nursed her, and I put a tent up in the garden of my parents' house to be able to nurse my mum. And I felt like I had to sleep in this tent in this garden for months while I was helping her with her transition. And I felt that was how I coped. But in all honesty, because it was during this last 2 crazy years, which we know has made, grieving a loved one even harder than it would be normally. I felt like I had to keep my mum at home. I didn't want her to go into the hospital. I didn't want, one of the things that, there's so many things that I wished I could change, but we can't, is, I didn't want her seeing people with masks on, but the people that did come as carers, were wearing masks in the end, but there's nothing I could do to change that. But I made sure that she was always looking at my face with someone who didn't have a mask on, so it wouldn't be frightening. Because, when people have dementia, they can't always express themselves.
Yeah, and remember what's happening, or what timeline they're in, or what day or year it is.
And they didn't know what was going, you know, most people probably with dementia or old people in homes, which is digressing even further, is they just didn't understand what was happening the last 2 years. I think they had no frame of reference for that. So for me, the grief was, I think my grief was very instantaneous in, you know, I was grieving my mum going for 8 years. So as she got the dementia and having the wisdom that I had, I knew that my mum would be going and something else would be coming in its place. I didn't know whether that person would be a cute, happy person or would be a really angry, ranty, really, really difficult person. But in some ways, I was blessed that my mum was cute and she sang. And because I didn't have a child, I dealt with my mum's 8 years of dementia by treating her like she was a child and she was my child. And that kind of made my whole journey with her easier. But it wasn't easy, the grieving as they're leaving, and also the shock of seeing somebody who, like your experience was different with Jeff because he instantaneously more or less went. But with my mum, she was slowly, her body was shutting down and the soul essence that had been her was going for, you know, a couple of weeks. And what a body looks like in that situation is very shocking, you know. And so you had to come to terms with that and your own grief, and also what they're passing away with as well. So there was so many aspects to it. And so because my mum got this tumor, which we don't even know if it was cancerous because it was just a tumor under her tongue, which I think a lot of old people in the last 2 years had in the UK, I can only speak about the UK, they had their B12 injections removed. And therefore, a lot of them ended up with the symptoms of 15 months without injections, even though they were given tablet form B12, your body can't absorb it. So they ended up dying of pernicious anemia, a lot of these people. So they got lesions in their mouths. And I don't think that's publicly probably ever been talked about.
Right. And we don't want to, I don't want to interrupt you, but you know, because of the censorship and the cruelty of the people, it sounds like the fartsies that run our planet don't want any of this beautiful, helpful knowledge coming out. So we'll just limit that part of the conversation. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. And so I think because I saw that aspect, but I also was there for the grieving process, it made it easier in some ways, even though there was that side of it. The actual thing that you're there and you're helping someone transition is a privilege in a way. It's a privilege to be able to do that for someone you love. And for me, it's very easy to do that. But I realize that for people listening at home, that might not be easy for them to do that. And it's different sort of grieving for somebody who's more or less had their life than somebody who is in another situation like you were with Jeff, who you weren't expecting them to go. And so the grief I experienced when my mum died was perhaps very different. And I know I can compare it because I'd been dating someone once and they died unexpectedly. And I just went into absolute shock, you know, because there was no preparation for this. You know, you think you're going to see these people again and you're not, and you're left with wherever you are at that time, which is very different than if you've got forewarning that someone is passing. You get this opportunity to, you know, if you're open to communication, talk about everything you want to talk about with that person. But when it's taken away and there's no preparation, you're just left with this raw grief and shock. That I think is much, much harder.
Mm-hmm. There's so many ways to go here. One of the things I would love to do to bring comfort to others is share something that I deeply, truly believe in all of my years as a being on this planet and working with people who have had illness, who have passed, who have, for whatever reason, whatever situation. I hold a deep belief that the way that somebody leaves the planet is planned, meaning their final moments. You have so many people that say, I just left the room for a minute. I just went down to put the kettle on to make a cup of tea. I'd been there 17 hours. I came back and they have gone. And I truly believe that it is already preordained when someone's going to leave at the time that they were destined to leave, whatever the circumstances, that the people that are there or not was how that person, that being that's passing had planned it. And we've got no real way of proving that. But I do want people that struggle. People say, I don't talk to my sister, I don't talk to my brother, I don't talk to my dad or his new wife or this or that. And people are still living in torment and their grief is stuck because they won't allow themselves just to sit back and go, what if that's the truth?
Yeah, and I think that,
yeah, the person didn't want me to see me struggling or see my face at the end or think that I'm in agony, and when they weren't.
I don't think it's even that. I think it's magnetically, energetically. If you love someone, the energy that you hold is very hard sometimes for that loved one to leave, and magnetically on a frequency for them to actually leave. So it's easier when the people who are the closest to them, like even when my mum went, you know, my dad's amazing for 95, being able to hold the space as well. You know, we would take it in turns to get up in the night so that she was never on her own in the last few days. So I was like tired beyond belief. And then my mum's, you know, sisters came and I said, I've got to go out. I have to go out. And I said to my dad, you're so tired, just go to sleep. And he went and had a nap. And when I went out, I had this really mystical experience at the supermarket, which I swear to God, there's this portal in this supermarket car park, because I got to this supermarket car park and there was someone collecting money, ironically, for dementia. And I said, you know, I went into the supermarket and turned around and went back. And I just said to this guy, you know what, we all collect these money for these things, but how many of us actually receive help from these charities, you know? So it was on a bit of a rant, and understandably so, because I was tired and what I was going through with my mum. And this guy then opened up to me about his dad and his brother dying of cancer and how he felt the same at the time, with a completely different charity. But he opened up and then he just burst into tears. And I hugged him, but it wasn't his eyes looking at me. It was like my mum.
Oh, no.
And I think that was the point when she left her body. And so she came through this guy and then we hugged and he was a bit shocked by hugging me. But, you know, I'm used to that kind of thing. I'm used to people, you know, just like things happen and I have to hug complete strangers. That's my life. But for him, I think he was shocked that he opened up to that level to me. And then he said, oh, we'll speak when you come out of the supermarket. And I was like, yeah. And I came back out. When I came out, he just blanked me. And at that point, that must have been when my mum passed away. Because once I got back to the house, I found out she'd passed. And like you said, you know, my dad was asleep. I wasn't there. And I think it was, you know, it was for her sisters to hold that space for her.
That is so special. Thank you for sharing. Another aspect of the sibling, or the child that takes care of the elderly parent, 1,000 million times have we not heard the stories where there is the daughter to the mother that spends her years and years taking care of her mother, doing everything, and the mother can be unkind and always talking about my son is doing this and my other son and my daughter. So many people can relate to this. And when the mother finally passes, it then turns out that the mother has not left, if anything, in her estate for the child that took care and gave up part of her life. And that story carries through in all cultures, in all civilizations, and there are so many people. And I think it's just a reckoning that there are certain elements of human nature or human behavior, psychological, emotional behavior, that will plug in during these journeys, these events, these rites of passage for us humans as we go from birth through to death. And I think for the people, the children, the older children, the elderly children taking care of said parents, that they would do themselves well to let go of bitterness and to somehow, some way enjoy the life they have, because that parent's going to come. Another really hugely, massively important aspect, in particular, when a parent leaves, however old they are, they have their whole lives for their children have run their energy through the children's energy frequency. Of course they have. The parents, if they were around their children, have held that child, have raised that child, have put their own belief systems into that child. But when the adult leaves and their soul leaves the body and the soul returns to the divine, they take all their energy with them, meaning the energy that is imbued with our energy, the children, it's removed. And what happens is a lot of older children, adults who've lost parents, they become completely unraveled. And one of the reasons is because they now have to re-identify, who am I without my mother, without my father, without the energy that has always been emotionally hooked with mine. And it's a really beautiful aspect that people don't tend to talk about. And as
Yeah.
you and I are trying to gift what we can today to help, to support, that's one of the things that we go through.
Yeah, and I think I probably went through that, like I said, years before, and also years before that, because, I was an only child of older parents. And so I always had this kind of thing hovering over me that I'm going to be orphaned, and I hear so many of my friends, who are adults like us saying, I'm an orphan now. It's very dramatic, but it's this, feeling orphaned even in your 40s, 50s, 60s. All of a sudden you feel like an orphan. I've still got my dad, but I used to hear this voice about being an orphan in my head quite a lot. And maybe sometimes it is linked to past lives. I do know that in another past life, I lost all my family in a fire, and I was orphaned. I was left without parents. So I think there's sometimes a residue of how you've lost parents in other lifetimes running in the background, that cellular memory of traumatic loss of loved ones. And then you're not fully living this lifetime because you're always worrying about how are you going to cope with the loss of your loved ones. And I know that I used to think like that about my mum and dad. I used to think, how am I going to cope with this? How will it be? But actually now I feel, bizarrely in a way, actually really confident that I will be able to cope when my dad goes, and that this whole worry that I projected onto myself, which I really did, I really got myself, probably the last 4 or 5 years of my mum's life, I really got worn down by how I was going to cope with this and how I thought in my mind it was going to be, when in the truth of how it actually was I wished I hadn't spent all that time worrying about it. So I think a lot of people listening may be projecting so much worry about how it's going to be, when actually in the truth of it, the thing is, human nature is that we cope, isn't it? The things that we worry about, the worst case scenario, you've experienced, what for most people is the worst case scenario about, finding a great love and then going before you feel you've had your due time together, from a 3D logic point of view, but from a divine point of view, which is probably, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but probably from a divine point of view, you've probably had exactly what was perfect for both of your souls together.
Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, it's difficult to accept that as the first front human, but until you let something sit inside of you, and then the inner child that will fight against that, the adult who's raging that, I have lost the love of my life, and, but there's so much beauty in it. But I do want to say, and thank you for pointing out at the beginning, in the last 2 years since Jeff left us, I have had days, weeks, and months where I was an absolute zombie, a complete non-functioning human. I couldn't eat, or I ate too much. I couldn't drink, or I drank too much. I couldn't sleep, or I slept too much. I would let myself rage and scream and cry and feel hatred and feel, why did this happen? And I would yell at him, why did you leave me? And these are all normal, natural emotions that I encourage all of us to feel. To be so honest with ourselves, not to try and be a good girl or a good boy, or, all the chatter, oh, well, at least he chose you and you had, a couple of years together and you found each other and la, la, la. Yes, all of that plays in. But for me, the healing of the grieving, whether it's also remnants of past lives, because we most certainly had a time before this time. We most certainly, the moment we laid eyes on each other, I never believed in love at first sight. We instantly fell in love. I pretty much moved in that night. And I'm not that kind of person. I was on my own 12 years before I met him. So it was like I was just always knew, and I just recognized him. And yes, I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky. And some people will say, oh, you're so lucky. Yes, I am. I am so blessed that did happen for me. However, the grieving part, is something that I feel we must all allow ourselves. And with the things that have happened in the last 2 years, the rage, the crying, the terror, the shaming, the not being able to get to our loved ones because things were put in place like glass windows, glass walls, and rules. This is also added to the trauma of the people who've lost their loved ones in whatever way and for whatever reason. And so I would encourage you all, beloveds, just feel the grief, feel the feelings, let them run through you, take the day, take the week, take the month. Try not to self-destruct, but sometimes in the taking down and getting rid of the things that we've let run our lives is the building up. Now, when Jeff was alive, he was so proud of the work I was already doing, my day-to-day therapy sessions, my talks, my lectures, my whatever it was I would do. He would come, he would watch me, he would get emotional. And he was also one of the ones encouraging me to get on BoobTube, which before, as you have had, you and I both had careers on television in real life, to both of us at the same time, like 28, 29, 2010, 2011, etc. those years. And so he was one that definitely encouraged me to get out and sit on my beautiful channel like this with somebody as beautiful as you and share real tools, real help, real life, real time experiences in this vastness of life that we're all living, because none of us are not touched by what has been happening, what has been happening in the last
and
years.
I think with grief as well, the other thing is, I think, like you said, is taking time out. And I think, maybe in some ways I'm more privileged and you are too, that we don't have a proper 9-to-5 job where, your employer says, well, maybe you can grieve for a week and then you need to come back to work. Well, grief doesn't really work like that. And because we're probably maybe very aware of our inner state of being, I made space to work but not work, make space for what I needed to do. And even when I've grieved, like losing a guy I'd been dating, I was like, I'm in no state to talk to other people. It's having that awareness when you're not in a good place to help people. But that's the work we do. If you've got a proper job that you have to do, it's like, don't feel guilty if you think, you know what, I can't go to work today. I just need to stay home and process this grief. And, processing grief can be really unattractive to other people, but to you it will be life-giving. If it's laying on the floor just sobbing for 5 hours, 10 hours, that's what you need to do to get this grief out of you. And give yourself that permission to do it. There's nothing stoic in going, I'm going to carry on and keep going to work, because you won't. You'll have a complete meltdown one day where you won't be able to cope. So if as you go along you feel that grief coming up, I always think it's good to make the space for that grief to happen, even if it's not grieving, somebody physically dying. I used to grieve a lot over these men I would date, like I would grieve like they died. I found it very difficult, and then I got really good at the processing at the end of relationships. But I see so many people really struggle at the end of a relationship, that the person, especially if you're the one appearing to be rejected, I think that's another human condition, isn't it? Rejection. Oh, why am I not good enough? When I've projected onto you that you would be good enough. But actually, sometimes, if we're really honest, I think a lot of our grief in the end of relationships is just the ego of, oh my God, they ended it before me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think if most people are honest, especially people who've been in long-term marriage, we ignore signs, we ignore our intuition. We just want to carry on, keep going, because we get so used to a program, a way of life, a routine that we feel kind of safe in. And, I witnessed somebody recently in the most brutal, vile, aggressive marriage. And truly, those words are very fitting, and I won't go into detail. And this person finally takes the courage to leave and spent some time with me and others, being loved on. She was very wounded, and eventually, after some time, she's now returned to the situation. And a lot of that is because there was so much trauma programming that sometimes we feel I'd rather be with what I knew than be on my own. And one of the keys to life for me is truly embodying who am I as an individual being? Who am I with all of my experiences? What have I taken from each experience? That I now stand in myself, the individual, with my own individual soul. Who am I without a lover, a husband, a wife, a group of people around me that I plug into every day? I remember years ago, I was so connected with 8 other people. We were all every day, this, that, and the other. And I remember after a while feeling a heaviness from all of that. It was fun, and a lot of us are very much on spiritual journey and discovery, and a lot of them had their own businesses in the metaphysical realm, and all good people. After a while, I started to feel like I couldn't breathe, and the texts would come in, and I started to get breathless, and I started to get anxiety. And it was my intuition telling me, you are outgrowing. Now, with that said, it is so important that I in myself was outgrowing something, but it doesn't mean that I was bigger than them. How many spiritual people say, oh, their vibrations are so much lower than mine? That is wrong. That is probably not true. And it is unfair, because what's happening is the individual soul spirit fractal vibration has got what they needed and are now not able to fit in to that vibration, because maybe they're not ready to grow with the group, or it's like we need to take responsibility, I always feel, for
well, that's what I had today. When I had my awakening 22 years ago, I was very blessed that I was in the center of London in Chelsea having my awakening, levitating off my bed, having all these amazing experiences. And today I saw the girl who lived on the top floor of where I lived at the time. And, today she had an awakening last year, and she said, I wished I'd listened to you more 20 odd years ago. I was like, yeah, but you weren't ready to wake up, and now you've had this, big shock, slightly different awakening than we've maybe, you and I've maybe had a gentler awakening but a lot of people are not having that now. A lot of people are like, wake up, you've got 6 months or a year to get your head around everything you thought was one reality is a completely different reality. And to go through that, there's a grief there, isn't it? It's grief. You're grieving how you thought life and reality was. And I can remember the day I went through that process. It was maybe 2 years into my awakening. I can remember sitting in a bathroom and just going, and I was already doing past life regression and being shocked at what I was even experiencing in those things. I was like, everything I thought that was truth is no longer a truth. I'm just going to bin all that and just go forward now. And it was like a real transformational day as I sat in this bathroom, and I just managed to get my head around it. And that, I think, the ability to get your head around the truth of what is your true inner world, isn't it? It's your inner world colliding with an outer reality. And where does that outer reality that you've been sold meet your inner world? And if you can merge that really effortlessly, you will go forward a lot more gracefully, perhaps, than some people who try to hold on to what they knew outside. And it's like when we do the regression experiences, and, I know in my experience, taking clients inside themselves, and they're having these amazing, from my perspective, because I've done this for 22 years, I can tell what's going on. And there's no, because often clients say, I don't know if you find this, they go, how did I do? It's not a competition. You're not comparing yourself to anyone else. There's only where you're at. But I can see, they struggle to believe what they experience, and they're crying and all this emotion's coming out in a beautiful way because it's a healing. But they're going, did I just make that up? And I'm like, no, that's your inner truth. That's your world. That's the truth. And I know, because I just told you a little bit earlier about, I try not to talk too much about angels these days, because I think there's so much question mark over all that, and what is it really? And, I've never personally seen a being with big white wings going, hello, Andrea. I've had experiences with angelic presence. That's what it's felt like to me. And I've had a voice say, this is Archangel Gabriel. That's what I had. And I had my hand up in the sky once. and I couldn't pull my hand down as I was meditating, and I was being shown, because in this lifetime, I seem to have known a lot of people who've died, you know, so it was like a roll call of all these people I'd ever known just stepping forward. And I was going, oh my goodness, you know, people I'd known as a child that I'd forgot, you know, because you can't remember everybody every day that you've ever known who's crossed your path. And so all these people stepped forward, and I was just going, oh my God, oh, and energetically, I was sobbing, and energetically, I was being shown the energy imprint and the impact that that person had on my life. So I had this experience with all these people who passed away, and this went on. Then the meditation changed, and it became everybody I dated, and it was just being shown to me the part that they played in my life in this lifetime, you know, briefly, however long it was. And I was like, oh my God. And it was like an energy being shown to me of the impact they'd had on my reality. And they were all just taking a bow and moving on, and that was it.
That's beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, we all have, you know, so many incredible experiences, and so many people won't allow themselves to acknowledge that this is actually real. This is actually happening to you. Like in a past life regression, same with me. You know, people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. And they'll cry and they'll go, oh, wow, that was so amazing. I always had a connection to this, but I never realized that. And then the mind, the linear mind, the brainwash part, the program part of the mind that happens from birth to when we leave, sadly, on this planet, which is what we've come to understand, won't allow the full experience to undo, to bloom, to blossom, for that person then to heal the cellular memory that's trying to awaken in them, and acknowledge that there are many layers to us, each individual, and we're all special. It's not just this person with the highest vibration and this person with the biggest, you know, following on whatever social media platform. One of the most beautiful stories I can share with somebody who died years ago was a beautiful great aunt of mine, absolutely wild, mad as a box of frogs. She ran a horse riding stables. She was loved and known in our city, in our county. And I was driving to get a reading of this guy in California. And I'm driving up this freeway, motorway, and I look up in the sky, and there is a body of clouds that are exactly the shape of Great Britain. Exactly the shape. And so I got all the good bumps, you know, the goosey bumps. And I'm like, oh my God, what's happened at home? Something's happened at home. And then my phone rings on my mobile, my cellular, my whatever you call it. I said, because you're in England, I'm in Costa Rica, and then I lived in America and Canada. So sometimes I can't remember the actual word, or try and bring them all in for, you know, for broadcast and understanding. It was my dad. And my dad says, your auntie died 20 minutes ago. And I was like, oh my God, I knew it, because I just saw the, you know, the thing. And my parents are so used to me, like yours are and were used to you, saying the random things that we say and see. Well, I went to this house to meet this man. And as I'm doing that, there's this little orb that comes in front of my rear view mirror. It just sits there, and I look at it and I go, Auntie. And she said, stay with me. And I'm like, oh, darling, go to the light. You're safe. You're safe. And it was interesting because during my life with her, she didn't really understand who I was. She didn't really get it. A lot of people are like, oh, she's so weird, that girl. She's a weirdo. She's a freak. She sees ghosts. She sees this. She sees angels. And I realized that she'd left, but she'd come to me because she was frightened to go to the light because of the programming. You know, when you die, if you've been naughty, you're going to go to hell. Like, it's terrifying. This is the damage that some religious briefings and lies have obviously done to hurt people.
And I think that's what we deal with a lot. And I've got a really great story.
Well, let me finish mine. I go to this man, and I'm sitting there, and he goes, oh, there's somebody with you. And I went, I know, it's my aunt. And he said, she's worried. He said, let's ask her to step into the corner. So we did, and we did our session together. And I'm driving along to my class, Berkeley Psychic Institute, the breakaway school I went to with Dr. Chris Lamont, who I've done some broadcasting with. And I go to class, and I say to my beautiful friend, Dr. Mayu Suro, who's also passed, I said to her, the energy frequency my aunt, excuse me, is here. She said, yes, she's here. And then Mayu spoke with my aunt. She said she doesn't want to go. She doesn't trust the light. And I said, what can I do? How can I help her? And she said, go with her, energetically go with her, hold her hand and bring the light to her. So we all went into meditation. No one else in the room knows what I'm doing because this is a private conversation I had with Mayu. And I'm telling you, this happened and it blew my mind. I'm in meditation and I'm speaking to my aunt and I'm saying, darling, it's all right. It's all right. I'm with you. Let's just step into the light. Look, who can you see? And all of a sudden, as my eyes are closed, as clear as anything, I start seeing elderly relatives. Now, this is my great aunt. I'm seeing Uncle Don, Auntie Ella, all these other people. And in my mind, I'm going, hello, Auntie Ella. Hello, Uncle Don. Like, hello, Auntie Sid. Hello, Auntie Mari. Like, they're all turning up. And they're all standing in a line. And my aunt is going down the line. They're welcoming her. They're taking her hands. And she's kind of looking at them and looking at me. And then it comes to her husband, her beloved husband, who's one of the greatest men alongside my Jeff Smith, who I ever met. And I won't say his name because I don't want family members to be all upset. But this is true. This is what happened. My uncle is standing there and he puts his hands down to his darling wife and she doesn't look up because she can't still believe what's happening. So she moves along to the end of the line and there's an angel standing there with dark hair who said to me, thank you. And then my aunt, and I go back into myself, I open my eyes and I'm like, oh my God, she's still here. She's still here. And then I remembered 2 of the animals she loved the most on the planet was a horse called Folly. And that horse, my mother rode it, I rode it. It was a really naughty horse and she loved it, Folly. And Folly was bought by somebody and we lost him. We never knew where Folly went. And that always hurt her heart. She didn't know where our Folly had gone. And she had this beautiful, among other hundreds of dogs, she had a little Shih Tzu dog called Benji. And Benji was put down before she died and left the planet. She was devastated by Benji. So I called upon the souls of Folly, the horse, and Benji. And I swear to you, as the gods are my witness, when I saw them enter the room, she went, ah, and then she went with them to the light, you know, and don't think I'm special, guys. Any one of us can do that. Any one of us can trust in the energy of love and help our loved ones not be afraid. Andrea, what was the story that you just remembered?
Well, that's my memory. I feel like my short-term memory, I think that's happening with a lot of us with these, you know, energies on the planet. The short-term memories shot to pieces. You think, oh, I'll say that, and then you forget it. No, he wasn't an uncle. He was like a beloved family friend. And he left me some money in his will. And I was like, wow, I never thought he'd leave me anything. I was like, that's so kind. Like, you know, he had no children. So he left me some. And then I started to feel like, my God, I feel like I've got symptoms of diabetes, and he had diabetes. And then I thought, is he attached to me? So I said, you know, are you attached, Uncle? And he was like, because I called, you know, a lot of family friends, we called Uncle and Aunt, didn't we, back in the day? Well, I think we still should. It's really nice. And he was like, yes. And he said, I loved what you were doing. It's so interesting. You know, he was watching me doing past life regression on TV and everything. And he was really into it. And he gave me a book on being psychic and everything. I said, but you've attached to me now. And I said, and I'm getting symptoms of diabetes, which is linked to you. You can't be attached to me. He said, but I thought it'd be fun to hang out with you because what you're doing is so interesting. I said, yeah, but it's affecting my health. You've got to go, you know. And I said, anyway, how did you manage to attach to me? He said, you were too grateful for the money, too much gratitude. So that's the other thing that I learned. You know, when people attach as entities, people think, oh, it's always negative. It's always because of negative energy that they attach. But sometimes, you know, everything in this universe, to my experience, is everything's about balance. So, you know, too much of anything is out of alignment with balance. So, you know, gratitude, yes, be grateful, but not overwhelmingly grateful to the point that you hold a hole in your energy field where someone can attach to you. And then you've got to clear them on, you know, and they understand that you came in. And I've seen it with clients, you know, sometimes the clients are like, oh no, it must be because I'm holding some negative frequency. No, sometimes it can just be too kind, too grateful, too much.
Mm-hmm. So that was your experience. And of course, we put warnings and disclaimers on our conversations because we're simply sharing from our own individual experience. We do not, spread fear or worry or anything. We want you to be very sensible when you listen to these stories, because there might be something there that helps you on your journey. So how could we calm people down that might suddenly start thinking, what if I have an attachment? And also you use the word entity, when you're right, entity is an energetic being, and it could be negative or it could be positive. Thank you for saying that. So how can we help people who may now choose in this moment to go into fear and into drama and try and make something out of what you said and turn it round? How can we just neutralize that?
I think most people, if they're honest with themselves, they sense, if you're intuitive with yourself, you sense, you can address something yourself, and you can ask that this leave, if you get that intuitive feeling. The thing is, if someone resonates with what we've said in a fearful way, that means, there's something in you that holds fear. So ask yourself, where is not just what we've said, but anything that anybody says that triggers a fear in you, ask yourself, where is that fear stored in my body? Where is that? Is it in my head? Is it in my heart? Is it in my stomach? In general, it's one of those three places. Can be other places, but in general, that's where that fear is. And just imagine a trap door in your body opening and closing your eyes and letting that fear out as an energy. Sometimes people see like treacle drifting out of them, clouds of smoke drifting out of them. Sometimes they see like little creatures drifting out of them. It doesn't matter what you visualize and allow yourself permission to release, but you'll always feel that feeling of relief once you do that. And I know that when we do this deep inner work, whether we do it on ourselves or whether we reach out for help with someone like ourselves, because some of it is tricky to do on your own, because humans doubt themselves, and this is how it's been set up, to doubt yourself. And perhaps the ability that I have of my intuition, and probably the intuition that Dani has, is born out of absolutely trusting our intuition, whereas a lot of people doubt their intuition. They don't trust their biggest gift. And that comes from, in my experience, I think most people who don't trust their intuition is because in their childhood, they've been told their intuition's not correct. And so this little seed gets planted that you mustn't trust your own intuition. And yet that's the gift that keeps giving. That's sort of like the graduating timeline, is to trust your own intuition.
Trust it, even if you get it wrong. Excuse me, even if you get it wrong, which I most certainly do and have done recently, really trusting someone, feeling the goodness of their heart, their soul. And then once their brainwashing secret kind of, program is switched on during this time of disclosure, then, seeing a shift in them and just thinking maybe they're going through a bad time, maybe they've got new contact lenses in, maybe they're really struggling with something. And then ignoring, and then for it to come out that this person is controlled by, let's say, AI, artificial intelligence, which sounds absolutely ridiculous if anybody has no idea about that subject matter that is playing out everywhere on our planet right now. Thank you for sharing the grief.
You know what I think that is also, it just reminds me, because I was at a lovely concert last night, and it just reminded me of one of the songs of Paloma Faith, who's, the artist we all know. But I was thinking, yes, because it would just really hit me how profound those lyrics are. It was like, do you want the truth or something beautiful? Do you want someone to tell you the truth? And I think in our inner self, we sometimes don't want the person to tell us the truth. We want to hear something nice. So that's when we stop trusting our intuition and we just tell people a beautiful story as opposed to the truth.
Now, it's so amazing we're having this conversation. And
I really see you looking out the window.
Yes, because some guys have turned up to take a tree down. Now, the reason for this beautiful house in Costa Rica is surrounded by these ancient trees. and they're called Indio descansa, which is naked Indian. Please, I don't need correcting if I've said it wrong. And I love these trees. And I know nothing about gardening or cooking. I'm just not made that way. I didn't get that gene when I was born. And my intuition kept saying to me, look at that tree, look at that tree. And for a couple of weeks, I've kept looking at this tree and thinking to myself, I think there's something wrong. But I don't know about trees. And it's one of the sacred ones that you're not allowed to take down because they're protected. And then I see woodpeckers on it, beautiful, pretty, pretty woodpeckers. And then I remember reading certain woodpeckers will peck, peck, peck and make big holes in the trunk of a tree and store their food for the coming winter because that tree's dead. And it's a big tree. And it goes over my internet wire and my electrical wires.
Oh, so maybe they're gonna, and with the story of the cedar tree. Do you know the book, The Ringing Cedars, the Anastasia books? Have you ever heard of those?
No.
Okay. Some people will have heard of these books. They're beautiful. They're about this girl who lives in the Siberian forest, and her name's Anastasia. And she knows the truth of everything. She's very intuitive, and her parents died and she got left in this forest. It's supposedly a true story. Anyway, this Russian businessman comes and he meets her and she tells him the truth of everything. And she says, if I tell you this and you write it into books, these will sell globally. And they did. I mean, probably 10 years ago, they'd sold 10 million. So goodness knows how many they've sold now. Anyway, they're called the Ringing Cedars because where I'm going with this is when the cedar tree is ready to be felled. See, sometimes we think trees are meant to last forever, but they're not. There is a point where the tree will die. Not all trees, but a lot of trees. And then the cedar tree rings to give off this shrill, high-pitched sound that it's ready to be felled and the wood to be used, because everything has a cycle in nature. And so it's telling people, and then people would wear like a piece of wood like round their neck. I've got one somewhere from the Ringing Cedar tree, and you'd often see people with these little round wood things. It means they read the Ringing Cedars books usually. But that's the truth. The tree has a cycle and it's ready to die at that point, or it is dying, and there's an opportunity to take the wood before it's beyond use.
That's so beautiful. And my point to this is that my gut kept saying, Dani, that tree's dead, that tree's dead. And I kept saying, Dani, you don't know what you're talking about. Just ignore it. It's fine. It's fine. And the other side's like, no, that could fall on the house. It could fall on the quad down in the driveway there. And then in the end, I thought, well, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do feel that there's an issue. And sure as shit, the tree's dead, highly, highly dangerous. And now I'm going to have to put you on hold for 1 second. Come to speak to the beautiful guy so I can take care of this. So just put your recording on hold, please.
Oh.
Right. Hi there, we're back. So I just had to move my ATV, which is a vehicle that you drive when you live in the jungle in Costa Rica. Cars do not exist here because of the non-roads. There are no roads. So I just had to move my ATV, and it's so incredible. In the jungle, they will take trees down with ropes, with all kinds of things. So hopefully the internet will not go out. But my point to the whole story is that I kept ignoring. And now the tree is in an extremely fragile, precarious position. And because I didn't take action, because I didn't think that I was smart enough, that I was clever enough to even imagine that the tree's dead because I know nothing about gardening, I dismissed myself on every level. And it was the wrong thing to do. So that's my point. When we have the intuition, like my computer's starting to fail, or this or that, I urge us all, like, act on it. Even if you're wrong, at least you're finding out. Or that radiator sounds a bit dodgy, or the water boiler thing sounds a bit weird, or let's just take a bit more action to trusting the intuition, or I really don't want to go out tonight. I really don't want to go to this thing. I'm just trying to please my friends and I don't want to go. Then follow that. Doesn't mean anything bad's going to happen, but maybe you prevent yourself falling over or something. I mean, there's so many ways to go with this, isn't there? But intuition is your number one driver.
It's the gift that keeps giving. I've got a great story about trees and intuition and healing. Behind me, can you see there. That's an amazing plum tree. It's over 100 years old.
Wow.
Well, when I broke my ankle back in 2019, and I was laying here a lot of time healing my ankle naturally, I was doing a healing session when someone was helping me.
Holy
And
shit, I'm so sorry.
don't worry.
They're going to take down the wrong tree. Holy God.
You must go.
I must go and take care of his terrible error. Hold on one second. So they're not taking down the wrong tree. They're taking down the right tree. But because I know nothing, they're climbing up another tree. Let me see if I can show you this. Let me see if you can actually see the man. Can you see him? No, you know.
Ooh, no.
Did you see it? Okay, look, it's a Sunday afternoon. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. 1 second. Why didn't
I know, I had to learn about coppicing trees as well.
Okay. There. Hello. Can you see him?
Oh, yes, now I can.
See, there he is up there. And there's the other guys. Woo! Hola, amigos. Hola. Can you see them?
Yes.
So look, they do it without scaffolding. They just do some kind of roping. It's really quite amazing to me that these things happen. But again, like I said, if I hadn't used my intuition, then I would not be in a safe position, because that tree could have come down and, you know, done some real damage, you know.
And people aren't, I mean, that's another thing. Don't get me started on planting wrong trees by houses, because people really don't realize what trees they're planting, and that, you know, that's maybe not the right tree. Hold on, what are we doing? Are we back recording?
Oh yeah, we're back. We're recording. Yes, goodness me. Okay, well, I'm sending them my love, and they know what they're doing, and it's quite remarkable. It's so old-fashioned here in the beautiful jungle. But again, yes, back to intuition. So we've covered some elements of grieving, how is best from our own experiences, not just as therapists, but also with our beloveds dying on us too soon or in ways that were very distressing. Entities that can get connected, they could be positive, they could be negative. And we were also going to talk a little bit about the division that we're all seeing on the planet right now. It kind of reminds me of that program. If you remember when Brad Pitt left Jennifer Aniston, for example, and there was this horrific, to my mind, it made me sick to my stomach that some buffoon said, hey, what team are you on? You know, and so this thinking in social media, this social engineering program started. And now, as we've seen over the last 10, 12 years, it has become quite the norm, has it not? To decide, which team shall I choose? And that's how you die. That's how you disconnect 100%, and you are overtaken by the matrix when you are not trusting your gut, and when you're getting involved in, to me, despicable, foul things like that serve to hurt others. So let me put you on speaker and please share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think you have to trust your own experiences, you know, well-meaning as other people can be for you in a myriad of ways. I mean, here's an example, slightly different, but here's an example. So I'm in Sedona, I go to Sedona a lot. I had never really climbed Bell Rock. One day, a guy said, do you want me to take you to the top of Bell Rock? I'm like, why not? I've only arrived that day in Sedona, and what people don't realise is that elevation in Sedona means that if you're coming from the UK, it can take you a few days to acclimatise your breathing to the level of what you might need to climb to the top of this big rock called Bell Rock, which is really high, and people have died, and people have fallen off, died, or they've had to be airlifted off. So it is pretty dangerous, but people do make it to the top every day. So I start climbing with these guys, and I get to about 600 feet from the top, and I'm like, that's as far as I can get. To the top, you can do it, you can do it, you know. And I'm like, I'm not feeling it, I'm not going to make it to the top. And if I fall off, I'm not going to fall off because you believed in me. If I fall off, then it's going to be because I believed in me and you said, don't go any further, I think you'll fall off. And I just carried on going and doing my own thing. Whereas that's how you trust your intuition. It doesn't matter if other people believe in you and say you can do something, you can do something. If you don't believe you can do it, then, you know, that is power to yourself and you take your power back. Because had I have gone up and fallen off, it would have been, oh, well, she died, she fell off, they believed in me, but I didn't believe in myself. So believing in yourself is the primary thing. It doesn't matter what other people believe, even if their beliefs are not the same as yours. You don't have to align 100% with other people to be their friend, to support them. You can support people, but you don't have to be 100% on the same page with people. You can just follow your own inner calling and be very discerning in how you do that. You don't need to say negative things about anybody. You can just follow your own path. That's how I negotiate myself in the world in general.
That's fantastic. Now, the last little bit there when you were speaking, the internet is really shaky. And I think that's because they may have touched the internet wires here. So my thought is, rather than put people through the agony of trying to hear, I cannot believe that that guy is 100 feet up over rocks. I don't know how they do it. They are so brave. You know, we in the Western world, my goodness.
But they do that. They do that for a living.
See, now I can't hear you.
Oh, you
now
froze.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you froze.
Let's bring.
Remember, he does that every day.
I know. Andrea, my darling, I think we should bring this to an end, and I think we should do a part 2 because we were going to talk more about angels and your experience with Archangel Gabriel. And so maybe we can resume in the next couple of days, because I think it's unfair for people to struggle through the terrible internet connection that's here now. So please, final words, if people can actually hear you.
Yeah, well, everyone, we're coming up tomorrow. Well, whenever we're going to put this live, it'll be the 8/8 Lionsgate portal. So a really powerful energy. Just believe what you believe in your heart to be true and think positive. And, you know, I've got lovely little meditations on my website for free if you want to do those tomorrow. So much love and many blessings to everyone.
Andrea Foulkes, thank you. It's always such a joy to play with you and to hear your wisdom and your knowledge. And guys, if you can still hear me, please look up AndreaFoulkes.com. She's a beautiful teacher. She's a beautiful therapist. She's a beautiful past life regressionist.com, AndreaFoulkes.com. All right. And to you, my darlings, sending you my love, and I will see you soon.